Hello everyone. Welcome to Anant Biomedical, a platform where we discuss all about the emerging healthcare industry. So let's get into today's topic of discussion, which is, are the medical devices used in routine health checkup actually accurate and precise in terms of the readings that they provide? So before we get any deeper into the topic, let's try and understand what medical devices actually are. Medical devices means any instrument, apparatus, software, implant, material, or any such similar article which is intended to be used either alone or in combination to be used for specific medical purposes on human beings. But what medical purposes do these medical devices actually serve? So medical devices are used for a variety of medical purposes such as diagnosis, monitoring, treatment, alleviation of an injury or disease. Medical devices are also used for investigation or modification of anatomy or physiological process. And medical devices can also be used as life-supporting equipment like ventilators. So now that we have understood briefly about what medical devices actually are, in order to understand the topic better, let's start with a bit of storytelling. So here comes the short story to better understand how medical devices remain at the forefront for assessing any current or emerging medical conditions that a person might have. So let's suppose we have got a routine health checkup scheduled for today. And by the way, it is always a good idea to get yourself regularly checked by your GP or doctor, even if you feel healthy. Why? Because firstly, it helps identify any early signs of illness. And secondly, it is a good time to identify any improvements that you can make in your lifestyle to lead a healthier life. So we are in the doctor's cabin and the doctor does our routine physical examination to make sure that we are in a healthy state of health. During the routine physical examination, the doctor records our vital parameters such as weight, temperature, heart rate, and blood pressure. So before we get any further into the topic, for those of us who are a little less acquainted with the medical devices, let's discuss briefly about what these medical devices are that are used for measuring the vitals of our body. For measuring patient's body mass and weight, a physician uses a balance beam scale. Now coming to the body temperature measurement, do we actually know what body temperature actually represents? Body temperature represents the equilibrium between the amount of heat produced in the body versus the amount of heat lost. So if the amount of heat produced in the body equates the amount of heat lost, then the core body temperature remains constant, which is a sign of healthy body, because that means that the body is able to maintain its core body temperature using thermostatic regulation mechanisms. Types of instruments used for body temperature measurements include oral thermometer, tympanic membrane thermometer, forehead thermometer, and there are various other types of thermometers as well that are used for measuring specific body temperature. For heart rate, your doctor listens to your heart rate with the help of a stethoscope. The opening and closing of heart valves make sounds lub, dub, which is recorded with the stethoscope. Coming to the blood pressure readings. Blood pressure readings are made up of two values. The upper value represents the systolic blood pressure value and the lower value represents the diastolic blood pressure value. So let's suppose that a person has got blood pressure reading of, let's say, 132 over 88 millimeters of mercury. What does this actually mean? This means that 132 millimeters of mercury represents the systolic blood pressure. Now, what is systolic blood pressure? Systolic blood pressure, which is the upper limit of the blood pressure reading, represents the pressure when the heart beats or when it pumps oxygen-rich blood to the valves. So that's what represents the systolic blood pressure. Now, what is diastolic blood pressure? Diastolic blood pressure is represented as the pressure when the heart relaxes, and diastolic is the lower reading in the blood pressure reading. So if someone has got a blood pressure reading of 132 over 88 millimeters of mercury, then that means that the person has got systolic blood pressure reading of 132 millimeters of mercury and diastolic blood pressure of 88 millimeters of mercury. Blood pressure can be measured using digital blood pressure monitors or sphygmomanometers. So by now we have understood what medical devices actually are, what purposes do they serve, what instruments are used for carrying out routine physical examination, and what are these medical devices. So we have briefly touched on all these topics. But now the topic that we are going to get into is really critical to healthcare. So I would like you all to pay your full attention. Due to the sensitive nature of work that is carried out by medical organizations all over the world, it is extremely critical that the medical devices used on the patients give proper readings. Because obviously, getting accurate readings is critical to providing proper healthcare services to the patient. Why? Because it leads to successful operations, proper diagnosis, and in providing critical services to the patients. But how do we know that the readings provided by the medical equipment are accurate? So this is where medical equipment testing and calibration comes into picture. But what actually is medical equipment testing and calibration? It is simply an act to make sure that the medical devices that are used on the patients are tested and calibrated to a set standard in order to make sure that they give accurate reading or functionality at the point that they are used on the patient. I would like to pose a question here. Would you trust going past a speed camera in a car with a dodgy speedometer? Obviously no. Similarly, no medical devices without calibration and testing should ever be used on patients because it leads to dodgy results, and that actually impairs the type of healthcare services that the patient receives. So all the hospitals have a huge responsibility towards its patients and clients to ensure that the medical devices used on them is accurate, reliable, and well tested and calibrated at the point that they are used on the patients. So let's talk about what happens behind the scenes with these medical devices that are used on us to make sure that they are reliable at the point of use. What happens is, ideally, a biomedical or a specialist clinical engineer, and they can be either from within the hospital, so they can be from internal clinical engineering department, or they can be outsourced as well. So they are invited to visit the hospital and the particular department which needs the medical devices to be tested and calibrated. And they are told about which medical devices need to be tested and calibrated. Secondly, they test and calibrate these medical devices to a high standard. Then asset labels are added to these products in order to build electronic asset file or register. And lastly, the stickers are placed on these medical devices. So either a pass or a fail sticker is placed to make sure that the service record history is up to date. So this is what ideally should happen in the testing and calibration process of the medical device. So by now you must have understood that biomedical engineers or clinical engineers remain at the core of maintenance of healthcare technologies, involving assessment, procurement, evaluation, asset management, quality assurance, regulation, repair, maintenance, and many other tasks related to medical devices. I would also like to bring to your notice that technological advancements such as prosthetics or surgical robots are the result of choral teamwork involving clinical engineers as the core professionals. Let's try and understand why clinical engineers exist in the first place. Clinical engineers exist to serve three basic purposes. First is patient safety, second is staff safety, and third is the management of healthcare technology and the various advancements going on in the field. Clinical engineer is a professional with ability to support and advance patient care by using engineering and managerial skills to a healthcare technology. Modern healthcare is ever more dominated by technology. Technology has a huge role to play in hospital and community settings, acute episodes and chronic cases. Indeed, technology has the ability to prevent people from becoming unwell in the first place, leading them to live a happier and healthier lives. Research and development into new healthcare technology, its application in clinical settings, and making sure that these medical devices work up to the mark requires the expertise and skills of specialized clinical and biomedical engineers. Despite this success, clinical engineers and the clinical engineering teams remain largely unsung heroes in the field of healthcare environment, and they definitely need to gain further recognition to its value in the healthcare scenario, because clinical engineering is all about the bond that it shares between physics, medicine, and engineering. Before we end the video, let's re-emphasize on the key points regarding the usage of medical devices to make sure that they remain calibrated and well tested and provide proper readings and show proper functionality when they are used on the patients. Accuracy and reliability. Testing and calibration of medical devices ensure that the readings or the quantity displayed is accurate and reliable when they are used on the patient. Annual preventive maintenance of all medical devices should be carried out in a timely and effective way as per the manufacturer instructions or local health guidelines. Specialist biomedical or clinical engineers with the right skill set for increasing the efficiency of the medical devices should be hired within hospitals and community settings to ensure that quality care is provided to its patients. So hope you enjoyed the video and you got to learn about who works behind the scenes to take care of the medical devices that are being used on you or your loved ones. Obviously, they are the biomedical or clinical engineers. So next time that you are in for a routine physical examination, do not hesitate to ask your doctor if the equipment that are being used on you are well calibrated and tested to make sure that you receive quality healthcare services. Bye for now.